Fleet Commander Robert Nash stood at the observation deck of the ESS Nighthawk, his weathered face reflected in the reinforced glass as he stared into the void. The Stardeath Fleet, humanity's most advanced battle group, hung in formation around his flagship, 12 ships of gleaming metal and barely contained power. "Commander," called out Communications Officer Lisa Wright, her voice tight with concern. "We're receiving another distress signal. Third one this week." Nash turned from the window, his gray eyes narrowing. The peaceful systems of the Orion Arm had never needed humanity's help before. In fact, they'd spent decades politely asking Earth to keep its aggressive tendencies to itself. Now something had changed. "Put it through," he ordered, moving to the Central Command Station, where First Officer John Baker already stood reviewing the data. The alien voice that came through was different from any they'd heard before. It spoke in standard Galactic, but the words seemed wrong somehow, as if whoever was speaking had forgotten how language worked. "Please, help. The darkness moves. It thinks. It hungers." Nash exchanged looks with Baker. "Location: Proxima Centauri Trading Post." Baker replied. "Population 50,000. Mostly Centaurian merchants, some Rigelian diplomats." "Was populated," corrected Science Officer Mary Wilson, looking up from her console. "I'm reading no life signs. But, sir, I'm detecting something else. Something big." Nash leaned over her shoulder, studying the readings. In his 20 years of space service, he'd never seen energy patterns like these. They twisted in ways that hurt his eyes, defying the basic laws of physics. "Sir," Lisa called again, her face pale. "We're receiving images from the trading post's security feeds." The main screen flickered to life, and the bridge crew fell silent. What they saw made no sense at first. Shapes that seemed to fold in on themselves, darkness that moved with purpose, and in the center of it all, something that might have been an eye bigger than the trading post itself. "My God," Baker whispered. Nash straightened up, his jaw set. This was why Earth had built the Stardeath Fleet. Not for the wars everyone feared they'd start, but for moments like this, when the darkness between the stars revealed itself as something alive and hungry. "Alert all ships," he commanded. "Full combat readiness. And get me a secure channel to Earth Command. They need to know what we found." As the bridge erupted into activity, Nash watched the security feed again. The peaceful systems had feared humanity's warlike nature, their weapons, their readiness for conflict. Now those same systems were about to learn why Earth had never stopped preparing for war. Because somewhere, deep in humanity's collective consciousness, they had always known. The universe wasn't just stranger than they imagined. It was stranger than they could imagine. And sometimes, being ready for war meant being the only thing standing between civilization and the horrors that lurked in the dark. The Stardeath Fleet's weapons powered up, their experimental reality warping cannons humming with energy. Whatever this thing was, humanity would face it. Because that's what humans did best. They fought the monsters, even when the monsters came from beyond the stars. Lieutenant Susan Carter didn't like the silence. The ESS Stalker, her reconnaissance vessel, crept through the debris field that had once been the Proxima Centauri trading post. Her crew of 4 maintained radio silence, watching their instruments with rigid attention. "Movement at bearing 340, whispered Sensor Officer Paul Howard. His hands trembled slightly as he adjusted his controls. It's not registering properly, ma'am." Susan moved to his station, studying the readings. The object, if you could call it that, seemed to exist in multiple places at once. It violated every rule of space and time she'd learned at the academy. "Multiple contacts," reported Combat Officer Alice Green. "They're forming a pattern." Through the reinforced viewport, Susan watched as space itself seemed to fold. Colors that had no right to exist in vacuum bloomed like toxic flowers. The sensor array screamed warnings as reality buckled. "Send the signal," Susan ordered. "Fleet needs to know what we found." Communications Officer Kevin Martinez began broadcasting their findings, but his voice suddenly caught. "Lieutenant, look." The thing they'd been tracking revealed itself. Susan's mind rebelled at what she saw. A vast shape that seemed to be made of living darkness, studded with what might have been eyes, or might have been windows into other dimensions. Tentacles the size of space stations writhed in patterns that made her head hurt. "Weapons free," she commanded, fighting to keep her voice steady. "Show it what humanity brought to the party." The Stalker's experimental quantum phase cannons powered up, designed specifically to harm things that shouldn't exist in normal space. The weapons fired, lances of impossible energy striking the horror. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the entity reacted. It wasn't a scream. Sound couldn't travel in space, but everyone on the bridge clutched their heads as something pushed against their minds, a vast and alien consciousness noticing them for the first time. "It's not working," Alice reported, firing again. "The weapons, they're just making it angry." Susan watched in horror as one of the tentacles reached for them, moving faster than anything that size should be able to move. Evasive maneuvers. "Get us out of here." Kevin's hands flew over his console, broadcasting emergency signal to the fleet. They need to know conventional weapons are useless. The Stalker's engines roared as they tried to escape, but space itself seemed to twist around them. Susan felt something she'd never experienced before. Pure, primitive fear. This wasn't just an alien enemy. This was something that shouldn't exist, something that turned the laws of physics into suggestions. Through the chaos, she managed to activate her command channel. "Fleet Command, this is Stalker. Be advised. Target is immune to quantum phase weapons. I repeat, our weapons are ineffective. This entity, it's not just powerful, it's wrong. It doesn't belong in our universe." The last thing Susan saw before ordering emergency warp was a vast eye opening in space, an eye that seemed to see not just their ship, but into the souls of everyone aboard. The Stalker jumped to safety, but Susan knew they couldn't run forever. Humanity had prided itself on being ready for any threat. They'd built weapons that could crack planets, ships that could outrun light. But now they faced something from beyond the walls of reality itself, and for the first time, Susan wondered if being prepared for war was enough. As the Stalker raced back to the fleet, she began composing her report. The peaceful systems had been right to fear weapons of war, but they'd feared the wrong ones. Now humanity's warlike nature might be the only thing standing between existence and something that wanted to unmake it all. Commander Nash stood in the grand meeting chamber of the Galactic Concordat, facing representatives from a dozen peaceful species. The room buzzed with nervous energy as holographic displays showed the spread of the cosmic horror through their systems. "We warned you about militarization," said Ambassador Zix of the Centaurians, their crystalline form flickering with distress colors. "We urged peace above all else. And now peace is killing you," Nash replied bluntly. "You don't have the weapons to fight this thing. We do." Chief Scientist Amy Rogers stepped forward, displaying the data from the Stalker's encounter. "The entity violates fundamental laws of physics. It exists partially outside our reality, which is why conventional weapons fail." The alien representatives watched in horrified silence as the recordings played. Even the warlike Rigelians, who had only recently embraced pacifism, seemed shaken. "The Star Death Fleet's primary weapons are untested," Nash continued. "They were designed to fight threats exactly like this, enemies that don't play by the rules of our universe. But we need your help." "Our help?" asked the Rigelian elder, his scales shifting color in surprise. "What can we offer that your weapons cannot?" Officer Daniel Adams, Earth's cinecultural expert, stepped forward. "Your species have existed far longer than humanity. Your records go back millions of years. We need that knowledge." The chamber erupted in discussion as the implications became clear. The peaceful races had archives stretching back to when the galaxy was young. If this horror had appeared before, those records might hold the key to fighting it. "There's more," Nash added, his voice cutting through the noise. "We need your ships." Silence fell again. The peaceful species had ships, of course, massive vessels designed for trade and exploration, but they had deliberately avoided weapons, seeing them as remnants of a barbaric past. "Your ships have power systems more advanced than ours," Amy explained. "If we can modify them with our weapons technology, we might stand a chance." The Centaurian ambassador's crystals pulsed with worry. "You ask us to become what we fought so hard to avoid." "I ask you to survive," Nash corrected. "Look at your monitors. 3 systems gone already. How many more before you realize that sometimes peace means being strong enough to protect it?" A new signal interrupted the debate. On all screens, another trading post disappeared in a twist of impossible geometries and writhing darkness. The horror was getting closer. Finally, the Rigelian elder spoke. "We have seen war. We chose peace because we saw too much death. But this," he gestured at the screens, "this is not war. This is extinction." One by one, the representatives nodded. Humanity's warnings about the darkness between the stars had been right. Their preparation, their readiness for conflict, suddenly seemed less like paranoia and more like foresight. "We will help," the elder declared. "Our ships are yours to modify. Our archives are open to your scientists. And," he paused, looking at his fellow representatives, "we will learn to fight again." Nash nodded grimly. The Alliance would change everything. Earth's Star Death Fleet would teach these peaceful races how to defend themselves, while their ancient knowledge might hold the key to understanding what they faced. As the meeting concluded and plans were made, Nash watched the tactical displays. The horror was moving faster now, consuming whole systems. But for the first time since this began, he felt hope. Sometimes the most powerful weapon wasn't the biggest gun. It was knowing when to set aside old fears and work together. The war for existence itself was about to begin, and humanity would not fight alone. In the vast archives of the Rigelian Central Library, Amy Rogers worked tirelessly alongside alien scholars. Holographic displays surrounded them, showing texts and records dating back millions of years. The Star Death Fleet waited in orbit above, a dark reminder of the horror they sought to understand. "Look at this," called out Chief Archivist Ben Franklin, his fingers tracing ancient symbols on a crystalline tablet, references to a darkness between realities from over 5 million years ago. Amy moved to his station, her eyes scanning the translated text. The ancient Rigelians had encountered something similar, a force that devoured whole star systems, leaving reality twisted in its wake. "Officer Adams," she called to the xenocultural expert, "can you verify this translation?" Daniel Adams studied the text, his face growing pale. "It's accurate. And there's more. The ancient Rigelians didn't just encounter this thing. They helped create it." The revelation hit like a physical blow. Around them, alien scholars stopped their work, their various appendages trembling in shock or shame. It was an experiment. Daniel continued reading. "They were trying to reach other dimensions, to expand beyond our universe. But something went wrong. They tore a hole in reality itself." Amy's hands flew over her console, correlating data. The horror we're fighting. It's not just one entity. It's what lives between universes. The ancient Rigelians opened a door. And now, millions of years later, that door is opening wider. "But why now?" Ben asked, pulling up more records. The answer came from an unexpected source. A young Centaurian researcher named Zixminer approached with another crystal tablet. "Because of us. All of us. Our peaceful civilizations. We've been using dimensional fold technology for faster-than-light travel. Each jump weakens the barriers between realities." Amy felt cold realization wash over her. The peaceful races had abandoned weapons of war, but their very method of travel had been slowly destroying the fabric of space-time. Each trade route, each diplomatic mission, had been one more crack in reality's armor. She activated her comm link to the fleet. "Commander Nash, we found something. The horror. We know what it is, and why our weapons might work when nothing else does. As she explained their discoveries, the pieces fell into place. Earth's Star Death fleet had been built with different technology, crude by alien standards, but not relying on dimensional folding. Their weapons, designed to fight unknown threats, actually strengthened reality rather than weakening it. "There's one more thing," Daniel added, his voice grim. "The ancient records show a way to close the breach. But the cost." He trailed off, looking at the assembled alien scholars. "Tell me," Nash's voice commanded through the comm. "We'd have to detonate a reality-stabilizing device at the heart of the breach. But, sir, it would end dimensional fold technology forever. These peaceful races would lose their primary method of space travel." Silence fell over the archive. The choice was impossible. Sacrifice the technology that had built their civilizations, or watch as reality itself was devoured. Finally, one of the eldest Rigelian scholars spoke. "We made this mistake. In our ancient past, we opened this door. In our peaceful present, we widened it. Perhaps it is time we accepted the consequences." Amy looked at the tactical displays showing the horror's advance. More systems had fallen while they searched the archives. Time was running out. "Commander," she reported, "we have a plan. But we'll need to modify the fleet's weapons. And we'll need volunteers for what amounts to a suicide mission." "Understanding the enemy is half the battle," Nash replied. "Get back to the fleet. We'll brief the Alliance leadership together." As Amy gathered her findings, she caught sight of her reflection in one of the crystal tablets. In her eyes, she saw the same look she'd seen in the ancient Rigelian records, the look of someone who had glimpsed truths that would change everything. The knowledge they'd found was dark indeed, but in that darkness, they had also found hope. Sometimes the hardest part of fighting monsters wasn't finding their weakness, it was being willing to pay the price to exploit it. The combined fleet hung in space like a constellation of hope. Earth's Star Death fleet had been joined by hundreds of modified alien vessels, their peaceful designs now bristling with human weapons technology. On the bridge of the EFS Nighthawk, Commander Nash watched the tactical display with growing concern. The horror had consumed 3 more systems while they prepared, its vast form now visible to normal space sensors. "All ships report ready," Lieutenant Susan Carter announced from her temporary post on the flagship. After her encounter in the Stalker, she'd been promoted to battle coordinator. "The reality-stabilizing weapons are charged," reported Officer Alice Green, now heading weapons control for the entire fleet. "But, sir, the energy readings are off the scale." Nash nodded grimly. They had one chance to test their new weapons before attempting the final solution. "All ships, battle formations. Remember your training. Hit it from multiple vectors. Keep your reality anchors active." The fleet moved with precision that would have been impossible weeks ago. Human tactical knowledge combined with alien technology created something new, a force equally capable of creation and destruction. "Contact in 5, Susan counted down. 4, 3, 2, 1. The horror emerged from fold space, its impossible form dwarfing the fleet. Eyes the size of planets opened across its surface. Tentacles of dark energy reached across normal space, bending light and matter. "All ships, fire." Reality-stabilizing beams lanced out from hundreds of ships simultaneously. Where they struck, space itself seemed to crystallize, forcing the horror to exist in normal dimensions. For a moment, it worked. The entity recoiled, its form becoming more solid, more vulnerable. Through the command channel, Nash heard cheers from various ships. Then everything went wrong. The horror adapted. Its form shifted, using the stabilized spaces as anchor points to pull itself more fully into their universe. What had been merely tentacles became vast limbs of solid darkness. What had been eyes became portals, each one disgorging smaller horrors. "Evasive action," Nash ordered, but it was too late for some ships. The Rigelian cruiser, Peace Eternal, vanished into one of the portals, its crew's screams cutting off mid-broadcast. 3 Centaurian vessels were crushed when space itself folded around them. "Our weapons," Susan reported, horror in her voice. "They're making it stronger." Nash watched as their carefully planned attack turned into a rout. The horror was learning, adapting, using their own strategy against them. Ships vanished by the dozen, either destroyed or pulled into whatever dimension the entity called home. "All ships, emergency retreat," he commanded. "Get us out of here." The surviving vessels fled, their engines straining. Behind them, the horror seemed to laugh, not with sound, but with ripples in reality itself. Hours later, in the fleet's emergency rally point, Nash faced the bitter truth. Half their ships were gone, thousands of crew members lost, and their enemy was now stronger than ever. "We made it angry," Amy Rogers said quietly, reviewing the sensor data. "And worse, we showed it how to interact with our universe more directly." The Alliance leadership met in emergency session via hologram. The peaceful races had lost many ships, but their resolve remained strong. "We still have the final option," the Regellian elder reminded them. "The sacrifice play." Nash looked at the casualty reports, at the names of ships and crew now listed as missing in action. They had tried to fight the horror on their terms and failed. Now only the worst option remained. "Begin preparations," he ordered. "We're going to need volunteers for a one-way mission, and we need to warn all surviving systems that fold space travel is about to become impossible." As the orders went out, Nash stood at his viewport, watching the survivors of their failed attack. They had learned valuable lessons, but the price had been astronomical. Sometimes failure was necessary. It showed you what wouldn't work, forced you to face the harder choices. The next battle would be their last, one way or another. They couldn't afford to fail again. Deep within the EFS Nighthawk's engineering section, Amy Rogers worked alongside alien scientists, surrounding a device that defied description. Part human technology, part ancient Regellian knowledge, it hummed with power that made reality itself nervous. "The calculations are complete," she announced to Commander Nash. "We've found its weakness. The horror exists by exploiting the boundaries between dimensions. This device will seal those boundaries permanently." Nash studied the device, smaller than he'd expected for something meant to save the universe. The cost. "All fold space technology will cease to work," Ben Franklin explained, checking final calculations. "The peaceful races will be trapped at sublight speeds. Entire civilizations will be cut off from each other." The device represented both salvation and sacrifice. Humanity's slower, crude, faster-than-light drives would still work, but the advanced alien civilizations would lose their primary means of travel. "There's more," Amy added quietly. "The device has to be delivered to the exact center of the horror's mass. Whoever takes it in won't be coming back." Nash nodded grimly. He'd expected as much. "Do we have volunteers?" Susan Carter stepped forward. "The Stalker is the fastest ship we have left. We've already seen the horror up close. We should be the ones." "No," came a surprising voice. Ambassador Zix floated forward, their crystalline form pulsing with determination. "This was our mistake. First in the ancient past, then in our peaceful present. We should be the ones to correct it." The debate that followed was short but intense. In the end, a compromise was reached. The mission would require both human courage and alien technology. The modified device was installed aboard the Stalker. Susan's human crew would be joined by volunteers from each of the peaceful races, beings who had never wanted to be warriors, but who now faced the ultimate sacrifice with quiet dignity. "The device's core uses elements of your quantum phase cannons," Amy explained during the final briefing. "Combined with ancient Regellian reality anchoring technology and Centaurian power systems, when it detonates it will seal the boundaries between dimensions permanently." "How close do we need to get?" Susan asked. "Inside the central mass," Ben replied. "Where space and time don't work properly, you'll have to navigate by instinct alone." The volunteers listened silently. They all knew the chances of success were minimal, But they also knew the cost of failure, the end of all reality as they knew it. Nash addressed the assembled crew one final time. You carry with you the hopes of every living being in our galaxy, human and alien, warrior and peaceful. All depend on what you do next. As the volunteers boarded the Stalker, Amy made a final adjustment to the device. It's funny, she said quietly. We thought humanity's gift to the galaxy would be our weapons, but really, it's our willingness to sacrifice everything to protect others. The Stalker's engines powered up. On its hull, a new symbol had been painted, the Earth Fleet insignia combined with marks from each of the peaceful races, a reminder that in the end, the differences between species meant nothing compared to their shared will to survive. As the ship departed, Nash watched from the Nighthawk's bridge. Humanity had spent centuries preparing for war, building weapons to fight unknown threats. But their true secret weapon wasn't their technology or their warlike nature. It was their ability to inspire others to fight alongside them, to show peaceful beings that sometimes the greatest act of peace was being willing to fight for it. The Stalker vanished into fold space for the last time, carrying with it the device that would either save everything or destroy it all. The final battle was about to begin. The Stalker emerged from its final fold space chunk directly in front of the horror. The entity had grown, its vast form now encompassing entire star systems. Reality buckled and twisted around it, space and time becoming suggestions rather than laws. All power to reality anchors, Susan Carter ordered. Her mixed crew of humans and aliens worked with practiced precision, each knowing these would be their final actions. Ambassador Zix monitored the device, their crystalline form reflecting the impossible colors surrounding them. The horror sees us, it remembers. Through the viewports, Susan watched as the entity's attention focused on their tiny ship. Tentacles of dark energy reached for them, each one large enough to crush planets. Evasive pattern Alpha, she commanded. The Stalker dove and weaved, using the chaos of broken physics to their advantage. Time to core. 3 minutes, reported Paul Howard, his hand steady on the controls despite the madness around them. If we survive that long. The horror attacked with impossible geometries, trying to fold space around them. But the Stalker's hybrid technology held, reality anchors straining to maintain normal space around the ship. 2 minutes, Paul called. A tentacle grazed their shields. Through the hit, they felt the entity's thoughts. Ancient, alien, hungry. It had devoured countless civilizations, countless realities. Earth's fleet and the peaceful races were nothing to it. 1 minute. They dove deeper into the horror's mass, where directions lost meaning and time flowed like treacle. The device hummed louder, recognizing its proximity to the target. 30 seconds. Susan looked at her crew, humans and aliens united in their final mission. Ambassador Zix glowed with determination. Paul kept them on course through reality-defying space. Each being on board had chosen to be here, to make the ultimate sacrifice. 10 seconds. The horror realized their intent too late. It tried to expel them, but they were too deep in its mass. The device reached critical power. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ambassador Zix activated the device. For peace, they said simply. Reality screamed. The device detonated, its power combining human weapons with ancient alien science. From the core of the horror, waves of stabilizing energy burst outward. Reality crystallized. Dimensional boundaries slammed shut. The horror thrashed as it was forced fully into normal space, its vast form unable to exist in just 3 dimensions. Its mass imploded, taking the Stalker and its brave crew with it. Throughout the galaxy, fold space drives went dead. Ships dropped back to normal space. The age of easy interstellar travel ended in an instant. On the Nighthawk's bridge, Commander Nash watched the sensors record the horror's death throes. Amy Rogers stood beside him, tears in her eyes as she monitored the device's effects. It worked, she whispered. The boundaries are sealed. It's over. The price had been enormous. Countless lives lost. Peaceful civilizations forever changed. The galaxy itself would never be the same. But they had won. Human determination combined with alien wisdom had faced down a threat from beyond reality itself and prevailed. In the years that followed, humanity helped their alien allies adapt to slower-than-light travel. New technologies were developed, new ways of connecting distant worlds. The peaceful races learned to balance their gentle nature with the need for defense, while humans learned the value of patience and contemplation. A memorial was built in deep space, at the coordinates where the Stalker made its final stand. On it, in every language of the Alliance, were written the names of those who had sacrificed everything to save reality itself. And in the dark between the stars, where physics once again ran true and dimensional boundaries stood firm, the universe continued. Different than before, changed by its brush with horror, but enduring. Because that's what life did best. It endured, it adapted, it went on. Human and alien alike, they faced the darkness and emerged stronger. Not unchanged, but undefeated. The age of easy travel was over. But a new age had begun. One of unity, of shared purpose, of hard-won wisdom about when to fight and when to seek peace. And somewhere, in the endless depths of space, the crew of the Stalker had shown them all that the greatest victories sometimes require the ultimate sacrifice.